At Gaugamela, Alexander's 50,000 faced a Persian army several times their size. And by nightfall, the larger force had broken and run. Not luck. It happened again and again, until one fact hardens into a strange one. He was never beaten in the field. 30,000 men against Persia's empire, and he died undefeated at 32. How did his infantry do it? The sarissa, the Macedonian pike, ran 18 feet long, so a soldier 4 ranks back could still level a point past the men in front. Massed together, the phalanx became a moving wall of iron no enemy could reach through. A shaft of cornel wood and an iron point, on the field a machine. Now imagine the oracle's later words were literal, that this man was, in blood, the son of a god. Not a claim that it happened, a thought experiment. Test the impossible premise against the record. Because real god blood would explain this first. A commander who never lost, against odds that should have buried him. The unsettling part isn't that the story sounds impossible. It's that a manufactured god would reshape a battlefield exactly the way a true one would. Welcome to the Impossible Archive, where history and the impossible meet. To find where that claim was born, go back to a desert oracle in the sands of Siwa, 331 BC. To find where the god blood claim was born, follow the record itself. In 331 BC, Alexander crossed some 300 miles of open desert to reach the oracle of Ammon at Siwa. He did not need the trip. Egypt was already his. He went anyway, deep into the sand, to stand before a god's priests in a torchlit temple. Imagine for a moment that the answer waiting there was literal, that the god truly claimed him as a son. This is not a claim that it happened. It is a thought experiment held against what the desert actually left behind. And what it left behind is documented. According to the ancient historians who recorded the visit, the priests at Siwa greeted Alexander with a title reserved for pharaohs, son of the god. Not a miracle worked in front of witnesses, a greeting, a formula of the temple. Here, the honest reframe matters. Every pharaoh in Egypt already carried that title, son of Ammon. It was a royal title, not a supernatural verdict, the crown's own word for its king. So, when the priests named Alexander that way, they were not testifying to his blood. They were dressing a foreign conqueror in Egypt's oldest robe of legitimacy. So why do serious historians still argue over what happened in that temple? The visit is real, the title is real, and yet the record never tells us plainly what Alexander himself believed he heard. A ceremony we can verify, wrapped around a private moment we cannot. That gap is where the myth crept in, and it is only the first thing the desert refuses to close. Start with the piece you can measure. You have already met the sarissa, 18 feet of cornel wood and iron, 3 times the height of the man who carried it. You know its reach. So set the mechanics aside and weigh that reach against the premise itself. A wall that stabbed before it could be touched. So weigh it against the premise. If the god blood were literal, this is where you'd see it. A reach no rival army could answer. And the reach is real and measurable, and it helps explain a record no enemy ever closed. That is the stake. If 18 feet of iron already explains the unbeaten field, the god has nothing left to do. The pike wins, and the divine claim is decoration. But hold the pike the other way. That wall only worked forward, on level ground, in perfect order. Break its lines or hit its flank, and the long pikes turned from hedge to burden, too slow to wheel and reface. The sarissa made a narrow strength, one that had to be protected, so something outside the pike still decided every field. Which raises a harder question. How did a fragile wall of iron keep winning, chapter after chapter, without ever breaking? That fragile wall had a hidden price, and the record names it. A phalanx only holds when its ranks stay dressed and touching, every pike aimed the same way, and that cohesion was never free. Hungry men do not hold formation. That turns the mystery from the spear to the stomach. Here the record hands us a number. In 1978, the historian Donald Engels reconstructed how Alexander's army fed itself and found that a soldier's ration and a pack mule's load set a hard radius the campaign could never outrun. Grain has weight. The mule that carries it eats too. Push the column too far and the food is eaten by the hauling before it reaches the front, so the supply line closes on itself. The sarissa demands cohesion. Cohesion demands full stomachs. Full stomachs demand a supply line no wider than a mule can walk before it starves. Pull the first link, and the last one falls. At Gaugamela, outnumbered several to one, Alexander won anyway. But if the odds bent to a fed line, the divine had no work left to do. Invincibility keeps dissolving into logistics. How far down that chain before something appears that logistics cannot explain? So put the machine aside and look at the body. In 325 BC, storming a Malian stronghold, Alexander went up a ladder ahead of his men and was left alone on the wall. An arrow punched through his breastplate and lodged in his lung, the record, not the legend. A barbed head deep in the chest. Weigh the wound against the premise. If the god blood were literal, this is exactly where it should show. The one body no arrow could open. And the arrow opened it. The man who cut it free watched him bleed and stop breathing, and believed the son of Ammon was dead on a mud brick rampart. Whatever kept him alive at Gaugamela was never in his blood. It was the pike and the fed line we already traced, chapter by chapter, back to a hungry mule. And here the pike falls silent. 18 feet of cornel wood guards a dressed rank, but it cannot climb a ladder or close a hole in a chest. On that wall the machine simply wasn't there, which is why the last clue is not a battle at all, but a body that would not decay. A historian might object, and the objection deserves a full hearing. The ancient writers agreed on one strange detail. Alexander's body showed no sign of decay for nearly a week in the Babylonian heat, long enough that his attendants held back the funeral rites. A god's flesh refusing to rot is exactly what a legend needs, but the plain explanation is already waiting. In 2019, the physician Katherine Hall proposed a plainer cause, Guillain-Barré syndrome, a nerve disorder that can still the body while the slow vital signs go on, enough to explain both his final illness and the delay in decay. A man breathing shallowly, pulse faint, could be read as dead by attendants who had no way to test it. So the premise fails here too, no god required. This is only a sick man misjudged in a sick room. The body itself holds no more secrets. That is an honest, complete account, needing no god. But notice what it assumes, that the body was misjudged in a sick room and the story ended there. The undecayed body was carried away, embalmed, and set on display for centuries. Guillain-Barré may explain the week in Babylon. Guillain-Barré cannot explain the shrine in Alexandria or why a corpse that failed to be a god in life was worshipped as one for 3 centuries. Alexander died in Babylon in 323 BC, not yet 33, ruler of an empire from Greece to the edge of India. The mystery was never how he died, it's what was done with him afterward. There is a case almost like this one, Lenin, sealed in glass in Red Square. Another conqueror kept not for grief, but to lend a state its legitimacy. But the comparison is incomplete. Those shrines are mapped. Alexander's tomb was lost so completely we still cannot point to it, and that difference is the whole story. Because look at the record. Alexander died in the summer of 323 BC, and for 2 years his generals fought over the body before it moved. Then his general Ptolemy hijacked the funeral procession and turned the corpse toward Alexandria, the city Alexander had founded in the Siwa year 331 BC. The dynasty Ptolemy built on that corpse ruled Egypt 3 centuries and ended with Cleopatra. Later, Augustus and Caligula came to borrow a divinity that was made, not inherited. Documented: the sarissa's reach, the phalanx wall, Engels's logistics, the lung that took an arrow. Unresolved, only where the body went, set on display for centuries, then vanished, with 2 millennia of searches turning up empty ground. The divinity he never had in life, men built for him after, starting with a stolen body and a general who needed a god. Go back to the cold open, the 18 feet of Cornell wood with no one to carry it. So where does the machine end and the man begin? Tell us in the comments. This is the Impossible Archive, where history and the impossible meet.